All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, a lot of times in life, when you move on from something that you realize you should have tried to maintain, the bitterness comes out on the back end when you cannot replace that thing that you moved on from, or somebody else may have tried to move on from you, and they still bitter about it because they have not been able to replace you. Why am I bringing this up? Because it's very obvious that Gregg Popovich understands that this season, down the stretch, is going to be touch and go whether or not the Spurs make the playoffs. Now, I'm on record as stating that I believed at one point that the Spurs were the dark horse of the Western Conference. It's becoming more and more apparent to me that they don't have the firepower, but we'll see. It's a long season. So if they can get their defense together. See, normally in years past, Spurs teams like this would have been 10 games, 8 games over 500 by now because of the defense that they would have been allowed to play. But because the NBA does not allow you to play defense much anymore, it's basically the teams that have the best three-point shooters that are going to have the best records, or who just have preternaturally long players who can guard multiple positions like the Toronto Raptors. But just to get back to the point, Gregg Popovich is starting to understand that Kawhi Leonard is gone. He's a once-in-a-generation type player in regards to what he brings to the table, and he cannot be replaced. So he's decided that he's going to send some shots at Kawhi in regards to his quote-unquote leadership. So anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Which brings us to the Kawhi Leonard quote. So I want to play a soundbite from Pop discussing Kawhi Leonard from Saturday. Take a listen here.
Kawhi was a great player, but he wasn't a leader or anything. You know, Manu and Patty were the leaders.
In other words, that's code for Kawhi was a great player, but he wasn't a company man. The company men were Manu Ginobili and Patty Mills, as well as Tony Parker. That's why when I told you, brothers, that Gregg Popovich declared the code red, or called the code red on Kawhi Leonard, he sent those guys. Those guys were his lieutenants in arms. They were meant to smoke out Kawhi. And when that strategy failed, everything blew up in his face. Now, had this been 10 years ago, he would have been able to make Kawhi do what he wanted him to do. But it's a new generation, it's a new era. And very soon, Gregg Popovich is not going to be coaching in the NBA anymore because he pretty much is a dinosaur in regards to a lot of the strategies that he tries to use to manipulate players. Right now, the players have far too much say, and you have to really respect them in order to get them to respect you. Popovich had to learn that the hard way about Kawhi Leonard because he'd never had anybody on that franchise who dared to rebel against him. From David Robinson to Tim Duncan to Manu to Tony Parker, all the guys who had come through the San Antonio Spurs pipeline either needed him in some way, like a Bruce Bowen or Steve Smith, guys who were trying to reclaim their career in some way, older players, or players who were military trained, like David Robinson, or foreigners like Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. Kawhi Leonard was the first great so-called African-American player that he had had in his system since David Robinson. And, you know, there were some issues there, I believe, because I think that Pop tried to manipulate Kawhi in certain ways, and Kawhi was not having it.
So Kawhi's talent would always be missed, but that leadership wasn't his deal at that time. You know, that may come as he progresses.
So Kawhi responded to reporters on Sunday. He said, I just heard about it. It's just funny to me because, you know, I don't know if he's talking about last year or not, but I guess when you stop playing, they forget how you lead. And he talked a little bit more, too, about how he would try to lead by example. I'm not sure that Pop, it was a little weird because the question that Pop was asked wasn't really about Kawhi, so it was kind of strict.
Absolutely, but that's what people do when they realize they have something good and they blew it, Rachel Nichols. That's what they do. They start talking crazy, they start talking reckless, they start making up things in their head. That's what they do because they realize, wow, I had something good, I had something great, and I blew it, and I'm never going to get anything like that back again. You don't even have to ask them about that person. All you got to do is ask them what time it was. Oh, man, it's time for that bitch Tina to die. I can't stand that bitch Tina. Ain't nobody ask you about Tina. They asked you what time it was.
Kind of strange that he went so hard on that. But I'm not even on board with it. I mean, I'm not sure Pop was taking some huge shot at Kawhi because I think it's okay to say that everybody's good at different things, no?
No, Rachel Nichols, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to douse out this fire because Pop is one of you guys' favorites in the media. But it was very obvious what this was really about. He's frustrated that his team is not playing great defense. They're hovering around 500. and he's looking at the success of the Toronto Raptors, and he's like, what the fuck did I do? What did I do wrong? We allowed this nigger to sit out the whole season, and now he leaves our team, and he has this Eastern Conference team as the best team in the league. And Pop knows. He sits down and he watches the Toronto Raptors highlights. He watches their film. He sees the type of defense that they're playing. And believe me, Pop knows. He watches the Toronto Raptors games. He sits down and he watches their film. He sees the level of defense that they're playing, being led by Kawhi, even though Kawhi has missed 4 or 5 games this season so far. He knows greatness when he sees it. So he's frustrated. It's like a guy who blew a relationship with a great woman, and then 6 months later, he sees the woman is married and is expecting a baby. And in his relationship with the woman, she was a great woman, but he fucked it up.
I think it was a big shot?
Here's my interpretation. For all of Pop's candor, he's always very measured and selective about when he dispenses that candor, whether it's lending a moral authority to a political issue he cares about, whether it's sending a message to the league that Jaja Pachulia's actions against Kawhi in the 2017 conference finals. There's an interesting moment at the very end of that clip, which you can see on ESPN.com, where Pop almost seems to reflect on the fact that I maybe shouldn't have said it, and he says, that's all I'll say about it. I suspect this morning he regrets saying it.
Of course he does. What he's going to do later tonight, he's going to go to the nearest bar in San Antonio and drink himself into a stupor. And he's going to put his head into his hands and he's going to start blubbering to everybody in the bar. Why'd she leave me, Kawhi? Why'd you leave me? I loved you. Ain't no man ever loved you like I loved you.
For one, it's a little bit in a man of his stature in the game. And two, from a practical matter, I think it's never a good idea for management and coaches to throw out insults or shade at players, because I think the players around the league pick up on that. And I think from a
ding, and beyond that, as I've stated in previous videos, the main reason why Gregg Popovich has been trying to cultivate this image of himself as this super liberal white man who understands the black plight was to make the San Antonio Spurs a more appetizing location for free agents to go to, because he knows they really have nothing else to offer. They're not on the left coast in California. They're not in a major media market like Philadelphia, New York, D.C., or Boston. They don't have the allure of a place like Miami. So what else is he going to do? He has to style himself as the wokety-woke coach. He was hoping that he would be able to lure in LeBron James. I'm sure that he knew that he had a very remote chance of doing so, but he was really laying the wokety-woke shit on really thick last year. Remember, he even likened LeBron James to the Black Panther. That's how you know when a dude is a super liberal white man. He just starts pulling these analogies out of the air when it comes to black men. And it failed. So now Pop is sitting back thinking to himself, well, our only chance is to play elite level defense. Our best defender is gone. He's in Toronto. This guy, DeMar DeRozan, he's starting to tail off like he normally does early in the season. I say this all the time. DeMar DeRozan has the best late Octobers, early Novembers of any player I've ever seen, probably. But around late November into December, he starts to tail off, and he becomes what he normally is, which is a guy who averages about 22, 23 a game. He's going to shoot about 44, 45% from the field. He's a nice player, but he's not Kawhi. He's not Kawhi Leonard. And Pop understands that the NBA will not allow them to play the level of physical defense that they're going to need to play to compete with many of these more high-flying teams. So, to make a long story short, he knows that he's in trouble.
From a practical standpoint, a franchise that's going to have to recruit talent. And look, this isn't a big deal. And I don't disagree with you. I also like Kawhi's response where he says, hey, look, leadership can be, during a stoppage, having guys come over to you and say, hey, what do you suggest about my matchup? And I just...
At the end of the day, you have to be you. Kawhi Leonard has to be him. And that's why when you compare somebody like him to somebody like Lonzo Ball, even though they're both very laid back, Kawhi always shows the tenacity when he's out there on the basketball floor. And Lonzo has been showing that more this season. That's what was missing from his play last year. So hopefully that continues to grow. But that's how you lead by example. You lead by example by bringing it out there on the basketball floor every game. And that's the best leadership that I could see from Kawhi.
But I suspect Kawhi gets a fair amount of that inquiry.
Yeah, I think your point, I totally agree with that it's a bad look for the organization, because that goes against the Spurs' way. They kind of keep everything in-house behind closed doors. Last year, I guess, was when those things started to change. But it's such a hyper-competitive league, and you're already trying to get any advantage you have in free agency as it is, that's not going to help you. Is it fair for Pop to say? I think yes. I mean, what do we want out of the people we interview? We want honesty.
Yes.
Sure.
And so I appreciate the candor.
Yes.
And then beyond that, how can we say that he's wrong? Like, are we calling Pop a liar? You know,
Right.
like, well, how can anyone say that Pop's wrong? I'm not saying we are saying it. Like, he sees so much. Our Spurs reporter, Michael C. Wright, does a great job, but he only sees what you're allowed to see in the media.
Right, but once again, remember, all Popovich can do is detail what a leader is according to what he would like a leader to be. Here's what we know. The last time that we saw Mr. Kawhi Leonard out there on the basketball floor for the Spurs in a serious way, they were threatening to dethrone the Golden State Warriors, or at least to defeat the Golden State Warriors in the 2017 playoffs. That's what we know. They were up by 20-plus points in the middle of the third quarter in Golden State. And who knows how that series would have turned out had Kawhi not gone down. So the rah-rah guys are great. All that's cool. But you have to bring it on the basketball floor. And once again, it depends on how you define leadership. To me, a leader is somebody who's coming to practice early every day, staying late, instructing the guys on how to perfect their technique, and who's working hard and who's going out there on the basketball floor or the football field or the baseball diamond or the boxing ring, and they're giving their all because they perfected their craft. That's what leaders do. It's like I tell a lot of these guys to come on my channel, especially a lot of these brothers in the knowledge, a lot of these so-called quote-unquote Israelite cats. They come on my channel. They always want to tell me what to make videos about. They always want to tell you how to do your thing. I always tell them, be a doer, not just a viewer. Everything that you demand of somebody else, you should be doing yourself. And that to me is what it's really about in regards to leadership. I don't go on other people's channels and tell them what they should be talking about. I do what I want to see other people do, so that nobody can say, well, you're talking all this stuff, but you're not really doing anything. If you want a certain type of topic, or you feel like there should be certain elements that are touched on, that's why you have your channel. Right now, we have an open forum called the internet to put out whatever energy you want to put out there. Do your thing. If you can teach the people, if you can instruct them, if you can elevate them, do that. But don't always be a viewer. Be a doer.
And have certain conversations. Pop's been there forever with...
What's the definition of a gaffe? Telling the truth by accident.
Well, I mean,
except he did not tell the truth by accident. Nothing that he did was by accident. He gave his perspective on purpose. So I'm not quite sure if that was a gaffe.
I mean, I also just, I don't know. I'm kind of exhausted by the fact that every player has to be everything. Right? We talk about LeBron's free throw shooting. Do you have to be 100% good at everything. Yeah. Kawhi Leonard is a fantastic player. He is Defensive Player of the Year multiple times. He is an MVP candidate multiple times. You don't have to also be the rah-rah guy. You don't have to be the guy taking your equivalent of Lonzo Ball under your arm or doing whatever we're praising this guy for being a leader tomorrow. So I'm okay with Gregg telling the truth. I'm okay with...
Well, no, you're okay with Gregg giving his perspective because that's all that he did. He didn't really necessarily tell the truth because there are a multitude of ways to lead. All he did was give his perspective, and he gave it unsolicited. So that's how you know that more likely than not it was not the truth.
With Kawhi getting his feathers ruffled because you want someone who's competitive to feel that maybe something was said about them they didn't like, and so I think Kawhi is going to use that as a little motivation. But I'm okay with you don't have to be good at everything.
Leadership's a human quality, and I imagine guys are more sensitive about that than saying not a great shooter.
Right. Well, maybe.
I'll say this also, that there's normally a direct correlation to leadership of charisma. You have to have a great deal of charisma to be a great leader because that's what's going to galvanize people. That's what's going to draw them to you. And we're all gifted in different ways. So in order for you to truly be a transcendent leader, you also have to have that charismatic personality, and everybody doesn't have it.
Maybe so. All right, here's what the jump.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. We'll see what becomes of Mr. Kawhi Leonard over the course of this season, and if he becomes more of a visible leader for the Toronto Raptors. We're also, I believe, going to watch the decline of the San Antonio Spurs, because from what I've been seeing, they just don't have the firepower to keep up with many of these teams with the way in which the NBA is officiating these games and not allowing hard-nosed defense. So peace.